My job is to steal people's memories and sell them. The official term is ghostwriter, but it's basically the same thing. I spend my days interviewing people who have done incredible things but can't string two sentences together, and I spin their jumbled, chaotic lives into a neat, three-act narrative for public consumption. I'm good at it because I'm a professional chameleon. I find the emotional truth, I polish it until it shines, and then I disappear. It's a lonely, invisible feeling job, and it pays the bills. My new assignment was a big one. The kind that could actually lead to my name being on the cover in tiny letters, with Leo Kincaid. The subject was Miles Corbin, a modern-day adventurer who had become a media sensation. A year ago, he and his climbing partner, David, had attempted a first ascent of a remote, unnamed peak in the Patagonian ice fields. A storm hit, an accident happened, and Miles had walked out of the wilderness alone, a month later, after being given up for dead. He was a hero. He was a survivor. He was also apparently a terrible writer. The publisher sent me his first draft. It read like an instruction manual. Asterisk, we established base camp at 14,000 feet. The temperature was -20 Celsius. We consumed 3,000 calories each. Asterisk, it had all the emotional depth of a gear list. He won't talk about it, my editor told me over the phone. Not the real stuff. He's clammed up with every journalist. Your job is to get him to open up. Find the story. We've booked you a room at a lodge near his place in Colorado for 2 months. Go get the book, Leo. Miles lived in a small, isolated A-frame cabin an hour outside of Telluride. It was a fortress of solitude, surrounded by aspen trees and a silence so profound it felt like a physical presence. The man himself was just like his house, solid, self-contained, and with a lot of walls. He was tall and lean, with the kind of wiry strength you get from fighting gravity for a living. His face was weathered, his eyes a pale, piercing blue that seemed to be constantly scanning the horizon. He looked at me not like a collaborator, but like an obstacle. Our first week of interviews was a masterclass in deflection. I'd ask him about his friendship with David. He'd tell me about their training regimen. I'd ask him how he felt when the storm hit. He'd give me a meteorological report. Miles, I said on Friday, my patience worn thin. People don't want to read about the tensile strength of your climbing rope. They want to know what it was like to be you. To be scared. To be alone. I wasn't scared, he said, his voice flat, his gaze fixed on the mountain peak visible through his picture window. I was focused. I had a series of problems to solve. So I solved them. Your best friend died. I pushed, my voice softer. That's not a problem to be solved. That's a tragedy. He stood up abruptly, his jaw tight. We're done for today. It went on like that for weeks. I was failing. I was getting nothing but facts, a dry, emotionless skeleton of a story. But in the evenings, after our tense, frustrating sessions, I'd watch him. I'd see him meticulously sharpening his ice axes, a lost, almost haunted look on his face. I'd see him staring at a framed photo on his mantelpiece, the two of them, Miles and David, grinning on some sun-drenched summit a lifetime ago. The story was in there. He just didn't know how to let it out. The breakthrough came one night, almost a month in. A blizzard had rolled in, trapping us in the cabin. The power had gone out, and we were sitting in the dark, the only light coming from the roaring fire in the stone fireplace. The wind howled outside, a low, mournful sound. Maybe it was the darkness, or the storm, or the whiskey he had poured for both of us, but something in him finally cracked. I had my digital recorder on the table between us. I hadn't even asked a question. The silence, he said, his voice a low, rough whisper. That was the worst part. After the fall. After David. The storm was so loud. And then when it passed, the silence was absolute. The kind that presses in on you. I'd never felt anything like it. I thought I'd gone deaf. He just started talking. And I just listened. He told me the real story. Not the rehearsed, stoic version for the media. He told me about the rope snapping. About David's fall. About the impossible, gut-wrenching choice he had to make to unclip himself from his dead friend in order to survive. He spoke of the guilt, the raw, physical agony of it, his voice cracking in the firelight. He talked for hours. He emptied himself out. It was a raw, unfiltered, heartbreaking confession. It was the book. It was everything. When he finally stopped, the fire had burned down to embers, and the first light of dawn was turning the snow-covered landscape outside a pale, ghostly blue. He looked hollowed out. Empty. He stood up without a word and walked down the hall to his bedroom, closing the door behind him. I sat there for a long time, the weight of his story settling over me. I wasn't just a ghostwriter anymore. I was a confessor, the keeper of a story that had almost destroyed the man who had lived it. I must have drifted off, because I was jolted awake by a sound that cut right through the quiet of the cabin. It was a scream, a raw, guttural cry of pure terror. I was out of my chair and down the hall before I was even fully awake. I threw open his bedroom door. Miles was thrashing in his bed, tangled in his sheets, his eyes wide open but seeing nothing. He was back on that mountain. "No, David, hold on, just hold on," he yelled, his voice ragged with panic. He was fighting something, his hands reaching for an invisible rope. My heart hammered in my chest. I didn't think. I just acted. I sat on the edge of his bed, grabbing his arm. It was rock hard, his muscles coiled tight. "Miles." "Hey, Miles, wake up," I said, my voice firm but calm. "You're here. You're safe. You're in the cabin." His wild eyes finally focused on me. Recognition slowly dawned, followed by a wave of raw, shuddering shame. He collapsed back against the pillows, breathing in ragged gasps, sweat beading on his forehead. "It's okay," I said softly. "You're okay." He just shook his head, squeezing his eyes shut. He didn't say anything. The silence was filled with his ragged breathing. I should have left. My job was done. The professional boundary had been crossed and then completely obliterated. But I couldn't move. I couldn't leave him alone in that darkness. I stayed. I just sat on the edge of his bed in the pre-dawn quiet, a silent, steady presence until his breathing evened out and he finally fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. I carefully pulled the blankets up over his shoulders. His hand, which had been gripping the sheet, relaxed, and his fingers brushed against mine. He didn't pull away. I went back to the main room and sat by the dying fire, watching the sun come up over the snow-covered peaks. Everything had changed. The line between his story and my own had blurred. I had spent my career being invisible, a conduit for other people's lives. But in that room, in the middle of his nightmare, he had seen me. I was the one who had pulled him back. He came out an hour later. He looked exhausted, but the haunted look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet, raw vulnerability. He didn't apologize or try to explain. He just walked over to the coffee pot, which I had already made, and poured himself a mug. "Thank you," he said, his back to me. "It's okay," I said. That was it. But it was enough. The work after that was different. The wall between us was gone. We worked on the manuscript together, side by side. He'd tell me a memory, and I'd help him find the words. He was letting me into his story, and in doing so, he was letting me into his life. He'd make dinner. I'd build the fire. We'd talk about things that had nothing to do with the book, music and movies and the quiet, simple beauty of the mountains. I was falling for him. It was a quiet, inevitable thing, like the turning of a season. The day I finished the last chapter, a strange melancholy settled over me. My job was done. It was time for me to disappear again. We were sitting by the fire, the finished manuscript in a neat pile on the table between us. "It's good," he said, his voice quiet. "You made it real." "Thank you, Leo." "It was already real," I said. "You just needed someone to help you tell it." The silence stretched out, filled with unspoken things. My bags were packed. The lodge was expecting me to check out in the morning. He stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the mountains. "So that's it then," he said. "You go back to the city, and I stay here." "That's the job," I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. He turned to face me, and his pale blue eyes were filled with an emotion I couldn't quite read. "What if I don't want it to be?" he asked. "What if I told you that the story I'm most interested in now is the one that happens next?" My heart stopped. "What are you saying, Miles?" "I'm saying," he said, walking slowly back towards me, "that for the past month, you've been the one anchoring my rope. And I'm not ready to unclip." He stopped in front of me, so close I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. He reached out, not to shake my hand, but to gently touch my face, his thumb tracing my jawline. "Stay," he whispered. "Don't be a ghost, Leo. Stay and be real." And I did. I leaned into his touch, and I kissed him. And in that kiss, I wasn't a ghostwriter, and he wasn't a hero. We were just two survivors, starting a new story. Our story.